The Spanish-American War, a turning point in US history. The Spanish-American War of 1898 stands as one of the most pivotal moments in American history. Though brief, this conflict not only ended Spain's colonial dominance in the Americas and the Pacific, but also heralded the rise of the United States as a global power. This war represented a profound shift in both America's foreign policy and its self-identity on the international stage. In this video, we'll take an in-depth look at this transformative event, from its causes to its consequences, and understand why this war still resonates in discussions of history and geopolitics. To understand how this war began, we must first turn to the island of Cuba, then a Spanish colony brimming with turmoil. By the late 19th century, Spain's colonial grip was weakening across the globe. For decades, the Cuban people had been fighting for independence, frustrated by Spanish oppression and brutal governance. Cuban revolts in the 1890s gained traction, disrupting the region's stability and drawing attention from the United States. American interest in Cuba was not purely altruistic. Economically, Cuba's sugar and tobacco industries were vital to US trade, and politically, instability in the nearby Caribbean threatened US security. The suffering of the Cuban people under General Valeriano Weyler's harsh policies, such as forcing civilians into concentration camps, sparked humanitarian concern. However, it was America's press that amplified these emotions into a powerful force, driving public opinion toward intervention. Two prominent newspaper publishers, William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, played a critical role in escalating tensions. Their sensationalist reporting, known as yellow journalism, exaggerated Spain's alleged atrocities in Cuba and used vivid headlines to galvanize American outrage. Images of suffering and moral appeals filled newspaper pages, with claims often based more on fiction than fact. One infamous exchange highlights the power of this journalism. When an artist working in Cuba reported he couldn't find dramatic stories to illustrate, Hearst allegedly replied, "You furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war." While this may be apocryphal, it reflects the media's undeniable role in stirring public fervor for intervention, linking America's moral duty with the Cuban cause. While tensions were already high, a single event ignited the conflict like a match to dry tinder. On February 15, 1898, the USS Maine, a US naval ship stationed in Havana Harbor to protect American interests during Cuba's unrest, exploded. Over 260 American sailors lost their lives. Though the cause of the explosion remains debated to this day, the American press immediately blamed Spain. "Remember the Maine!" became a rallying cry, plastered across newspapers and shouted in American streets. Public outcry demanded action against Spain. Under intense political pressure, President William McKinley, who initially sought a diplomatic resolution, asked Congress for authorization to use force. On April 25, 1898, the United States formally declared war on Spain. The Spanish-American War lasted just over 3 months, yet it was packed with dramatic battles and historic moments. The first shots of the war weren't fired in Cuba, but in the far-flung Philippine Islands, another Spanish colony. On May 1, 1898, Commodore George Dewey led US naval forces to a decisive victory in the Battle of Manila Bay. With superior ships and weaponry, the US Navy destroyed Spain's Pacific Fleet with minimal American casualties. This victory not only secured American control of the Philippines, but also showcased the might of the modern US Navy on an international stage. In June, US forces turned their attention to Cuba. Among the soldiers sent was the 1st US Volunteer Cavalry, better known as the Rough Riders. This charismatic and diverse group, led by Theodore Roosevelt, became the embodiment of American valor in the war. The defining event of the Cuban campaign was the Battle of San Juan Hill on July 1, 1898. It was here that Roosevelt and his Rough Riders charged up the hill, alongside African-American regiments known as Buffalo Soldiers. Their courage and strategy secured a pivotal victory, forcing Spanish troops to retreat and ensuring eventual American triumph in Cuba. By August 1898, Spanish forces had been decisively defeated. Peace talks began soon after, culminating in the signing of the Treaty of Paris in December. This agreement carried monumental implications for both Spain and the United States. Spain ceded control of Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, ending its centuries-long colonial rule. Cuba was promised independence, but under the watchful eye of the United States. Through the Platt Amendment, the US retained significant control over Cuban affairs, ensuring the nation-state aligned with American interests. For the United States, these new territories represented a dramatic shift. America had moved beyond its traditional isolationism and assumed a new role as a colonial power on the world stage. However, this expansion also sparked heated debates about imperialism's merits and morality. While many Americans celebrated victory, the nation wrestled with a profound question. Should the US acquire overseas territories? Advocates of imperialism argued that extending US influence abroad would facilitate economic growth, strengthen national security, and fulfill what they believed to be America's moral duty to bring civilization to less developed nations. Iconic figures like Senator Albert Beveridge and even President McKinley expressed support for creating an American empire. On the other hand, the anti-imperialist movement voiced strong opposition. Leaders such as Andrew Carnegie, Mark Twain, and former President Grover Cleveland argued that imperialism was fundamentally un-American, violating the principles of liberty and self-determination. Nowhere was this debate more evident than in discussions over the Philippines, where continued US occupation led to a brutal and controversial Philippine-American War. This transformative era was shaped by unforgettable individuals. Theodore Roosevelt, a larger-than-life figure, used his leadership of the Rough Riders to catapult himself to fame and, ultimately, the presidency. Roosevelt symbolized the rugged determination of the era. Commodore George Dewey, the hero of Manila Bay, demonstrated the US Navy's growing prowess and elevated America's military reputation globally. Meanwhile, journalists like Hearst and Pulitzer wielded unprecedented power, highlighting how media could influence both public opinion and national policy. The lessons of the Spanish-American War went beyond the immediate conflict. Its outcomes fundamentally reshaped American foreign policy. No longer confined by its isolationist roots, the United States entered the 20th century as an emerging global superpower. Control over Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines boosted the US presence in both the Atlantic and Pacific. The victory also established patterns of interventionism that would define later American actions in Latin America, Asia, and beyond. The war demonstrated the power of public opinion in driving military decisions. The role of yellow journalism underscored how media could shape not only domestic sentiment, but also foreign relations, a dynamic still visible in contemporary geopolitics. The Spanish-American War was a brief conflict, but its significance cannot be overstated. It marked the end of Spain's colonial era and the dawn of America's transformation into a global power. Events like the sinking of the USS Maine and the triumphs of the Rough Riders became embedded in national memory. Equally important, the war sparked essential debates about imperialism, citizenship, and America's role in the world, questions that continue to echo through history. For the United States, 1898 wasn't just a year of victory. It was a turning point in how the nation viewed itself and how the world viewed America. In reflecting on this iconic war, we gain not only an understanding of the past, but also insights into the forces that continue to shape our world today. Please like and subscribe for more historical content.